Hello everyone, happy Wednesday, how's it going? Welcome to Archetype, sponsored by Dell. I'm your host Ashley, and we'll get right to it. So if you guys joined me last week, we started doing an alien. It was pretty freeform, just trying to figure out some stuff, and we kind of ended up with this weird, kind of like alien fauna, kind of like weird bat bird creature. And so, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of hang out and detail and get the anatomy more lined up and, maybe feeling a bit more organic and kind of solidify some more of this character's design and whatnot. So if you're there, feel free to say hi or just be lurking. Either way is cool. Okay, Sato always here saying hi, so I appreciate it. So yeah, we're gonna get into it. It should be fun. So I went and grabbed some new reference because I lost I lost the other one. Because now we have a little bit more solidified design. I went ahead and just grabbed things that felt right to kind of reference. So, koalas have some really interesting hands that I might, transfer over to our design. Looking at some feathers, I thought his eye was really cool more than anything else. We have our obvious like bat face that we can kind of start detailing and stuff. And then I really like all these like little wrinkles and stuff on this. I think they're called galeals or galata, something like that. And yeah, just some of this really interesting like skin texture. These are little sugar gliders or flying lemurs type creatures, which is pretty close to kind of like what the body type we're going for is, except again my idea was maybe he hooks himself on like a gibbon or like a moves a little more ape-like, but maybe he's got, I don't know, we could add maybe feathers or something that will give him. So I grabbed some feathers, or maybe he's got some feathers or something. So he kind of is like a glider type fauna, but instead of these like skin wings, maybe he just hovers with some like feathers on his little weird back leg type things. So that was kind of my thought process for going this reference. So just wanted to share that with you guys and kind of the direction I was thinking and heading in, and we'll continue to sculpt and stuff. And I'm just going to go ahead and hide the fur and stuff for now, because it's either, I mean, we may keep it or maybe we won't, but I think it's good for now just to kind of like work on the body. 512 design is saying issue with my masking brush, pressing Control Alt rather than moving parts of the mask. Project. If you hold Control and Alt, it'll do the inverse. So I don't know if that's what you're talking about. But yeah, Control Alt will just be it's just a masking thing, and then that's always going to be the trickiest part. I appreciate you sending a link, but I'm not going to be able to open it on stream. I can't open it on stream. But Control Alt, or if you're hitting Shift Alt, you'll accidentally invert it. If you're trying to remove parts of the mask, so if you have a mask like this and you want to get rid of it, yeah, holding Control Alt over the hovered part that is a mask will start to get rid of it. But if you hit Control Alt over that, right, it has nothing to select, so it'll unselect everything. So you got to make sure that you're Control Alt. Because if you hold Control and Alt over something that doesn't have a mask, it'll do something else, right? Because it only can affect a mask. So hopefully that helps. Other than that, I'm not sure. Oh, using lasso? Using the lasso tool or the pen tool? Oops, I almost hit Control Save. Yeah, lasso or pen should be pretty much exactly the same. If I hold Control, and then if I hold Control Alt, it should just get rid of it, right? And now I can use that to, you know, make a pattern or whatever. I actually kind of like that for later for painting. It's kind of fun. But yeah, if that's not working, you could always try, you know, unloading and reloading ZBrush. Sometimes ZBrush can be a bit of a pain with weird technical issues. There's plenty of times where I also have to go into my brushes and just say reset all brushes, because sometimes, you know, you accidentally push a button or, you know, something's weird. Oops. See, even like that. So yeah, it can definitely be a little finicky sometimes depending on what you're working on. I'm going to open his mouth before I see remesh. So that way we can add some cool little teeth detail. I think there's a bat that I can't remember the name of it. Maybe it's the vampire bat, but I'm not entirely sure. But there's a bat that's got like 2 teeth in the front that almost look like one. It's really cool. So I think I'll probably incorporate that into his design. And then I think at this point, I'll probably just merge all of this down. So now I'm not working with groups, so I can kind of solidify. I don't always normally do this. Sometimes I'll just always leave them separate parts, but I think because I'm detailing so much finalized like skin type detail, I think I want it to be one mesh. So I get like a really, really smooth surface. Most of the time it doesn't necessarily matter. But yeah, I kind of have everything that I want shape-wise from, oops, the mesh, and then I can go ahead and Z-remesh it and have it be nice and pretty. I'll duplicate it, but I might not even need to project it because I haven't put that much crazy detail onto this yet, so there just might not be a need for it. I might try to carve out a bit more of a nose though before I Z-remesh, just so that maybe I get more topology in that area. Go ahead and remesh it. And for our purposes, like something like this would probably be fine. I try to go as low as I can, so I'll usually do half and do it again and see if I get something. I'll kind of keep going until I feel like there's an area that breaks. So like I like the topology in the nose for that, but you can see that here I kind of lose a lot of it. So at this point I'll just be like, yeah, that's fine. Like that's good enough. And then I can keep working on it. And like I said, I don't think I really need to project any of this detail, so I'm just gonna delete that old one. And then I'll just keep working on this one. Get his little throat out of the way here. And now now that I have the topology, the mouth isn't really proper, but I like to get this kind of topology so that way when I pull up the jaw and I pull it down, I'll have a nice set of topology to create good overlap for the mouth. So that way when I pinch it or do anything like that later, it'll just be easier to handle and create more realistic fold. And I can start subdividing some of this. I'm just finding some forms, trying to see what, you know, my reference shows as far as kind of like eyelid and, you know, maybe what kind of wrinkle details I could get up into the face. You know, like that Galata, or however you pronounce it, had a lot of these cool, almost like almost baboonish, you know, kind of cool wrinkly detail that could go and transfer up into, you know, maybe the face or something. So I like blocking out little details like this to figure out, you know, what kind of detailing I think will work. And finding like a nice flow to the character is a good way to start. You know, don't just start going in and like, I don't know, using your favorite skin tool brush and going really crazy on details first. Like try to kind of block out an idea. And then from there you can kind of start accentuating more of that idea. And then I can duplicate this and go down to the lowest, and let's see if I can find a decent loop here. Almost. That's a decent one. So now I can auto group it. So now I have the inside of the mouth here. And then I'm going to turn on double just so I can see kind of what I'm doing. Like that. And then I'll shrink this down. And then I'll grab this guy, and probably this one and this one. And now I have some gums that I can use. So I can start making his gums. So I can extrude those out. Pull those in now. And now I have kind of like a decent basis to where the inside of the mouth is too, so I can kind of start sculpting that down and in there. Same thing with the top. Oops. And then we can add some teeth. So again, I just like to work with whatever I have. So I'll just duplicate because it's kind of in the area that I like. And then I'll just do cone. And I got 2 by default, which is totally fine. But I'll go ahead and do that thing that I was saying. We're gonna make 2 kind of feel like 1. So I have that. Now I can also duplicate. Then I can just go backwards a little bit. And now I have other teeth that aren't like kind of weird or merged with anything. We can look at some teeth reference that I have. You know, maybe we can do something interesting where it's more like super reversed, kind of backwards facing teeth. This is pretty scary. So when he grabs stuff, they can't escape his little jaws. We're not really sure what he eats yet. Maybe he eats just giant insects, but even then, he still needs, you know, some good teeth to support capturing his prey. And now that we have that, now we can just take that and duplicate it. Turn it around, face it down, put it down. And now we have the bottom teeth in which we can kind of, I like to just use the move topological and make my brush really big and then just kind of fudge this stuff around. And then maybe we can take this front tooth here. And maybe we can make this the bigger incisors that go on either side of the one tooth at the top. Yeah, something like that. And then I can hide some of this, and I can use that mask tool to then extract and make a tongue. By default, it's always like really ludicrously thick. Gotta work in like super small numbers. And then once I have that, I can smooth that out. You know, we can maybe make like a weird fork tongue or something later. Just trying to hint at maybe some maybe interesting patterns or something that we could do. Because like a big thing with, you know, creature design or making a creature that feels interesting is having, you know, big areas of kind of rest and interest, and then areas of like busyness. So, you know, up here with his nostrils and everything, it's going to get very detailed and oriented and very busy. So it's nice to be able to go from there, looking at that, and have an area of kind of like big smooth shapes on his head. And having that kind of back and forth is just a nice way to not have your viewer who's looking at it get, you know, too overwhelmed by everything, and then, you know, they might not really know what they're even looking at. I'm sure everyone's seen kind of, you know, like an over detailed render of something, and you're just like, what is, I can't make out anything because there's no, you know, detail hierarchy or shape hierarchy with like the choices that they're making, and that's going to confuse your viewers a lot. Make sure the back face mask is on for anything that's really thin. Gotta make sure that all these forms are feeling smooth or like are tapering out. That's like that's the nice part about, you know, remeshing and then continuing to work on your model and having those subdivisions to be able to move up and down. So that way if something feels a little kinky or out of place, it's really easy to go down to that lowest subdivision and kind of smooth out anything that's feeling weird. So you can have really clean silhouettes. It's very annoying that the head does not have polypaint. There we go. I'll probably be able to add polypaint this stream too, which I think adds a lot. Like usually I'll get to a certain part of my character and then I'll start adding polypaint because I feel like polypaint helps a lot with describing more of that character than just seeing like a white or like a gray model. So I think I wanted to change his hands into like weird koala hands. So I could take this and kind of put this on the other side. And that could be kind of cool. And then sculpting what would be like a very big, like double thumb palm kind of thing. And now we can get rid of this area over here. I think I have some. Also need some monkey hand reference would be good too. Just so we can see some cool detailing type stuff like, oh yeah, that's cool. So I found that. Right, like I love how long the palm is and then, you know, where the hand is. I'm just trying to picture one more thumb, right? Just picture one more thumb on there. See what you get. You could even Photoshop the one more thumb to get like more interesting reference if you want, you know. I think that stuff can be pretty interesting. Pinterest is the best place for like really interesting reference. Because you just find like details of things that you normally wouldn't get anywhere else. Or you just get really nice high-res images. Like look at these fingers. Got like these crazy little white knuckles. And then look at how wide. I think this is actually really interesting. See where his claw comes out versus where the pad actually is? Like that's super weird, right? It's crazy weird. Doesn't get any weirder than that. So, you know, just incorporate this stuff into your designs. It's basically like a gecko. Look at that. Look at that claw. It's crazy. And that's what they're built to do, right? They're built to hang on trees and jump from them. So if that's our reference, you know, like we should take and utilize these kinds of shapes that already exist in the wild. I'm telling you, it doesn't get any weirder than nature. Nature's super weird, and that's why we love it. So later when we add claws, now I know I'll put them in kind of like a weirder place than I would normally think to put them. And that's just, you know, that's like kind of the importance of reference and building that visual library, because now that I know it, you can be certain I'll abuse it. Knowing that point of reference. I'm also going to try to make his knuckles like a lot bonier, right, like we had in the reference as well. And I'll try to round out that fat pad to be like really interesting. And then we'll have the, you know, the claw stick out kind of somewhere in there. And then we can kind of make sure that his thumb is kind of doing something similar. His thumbs. I thought it'd be cool if there was like some webbing in between, but I'm not really sure yet. I haven't decided whether I like that or not, but we'll see. Yeah, definitely be inspired by, you know, the world around you. When I was a kid, I don't know if I've said this on stream or not, but my goal was to be Steve Irwin when I was a kid. I thought I was going to move to Australia and like be the next crocodile hunter. That was kind of my plan. And so ever since I was a kid, I was always really fascinated with animals, and I was always drawing animals, drawing horses and dragons and wolves and cats, you know. And I always just thought nature was so interesting. So I wanted to be a herpetologist. I wanted to study reptiles and amphibians. But it turned out that all that knowledge still really helps for once I discovered that I really wanted to do art for a living, which was more in high school. Because all that knowledge is still so important when you're designing your own creatures and characters. I think I'm going to keep it. I think it's just cooler to have two thumbs that aren't really connected. But yeah, so all that knowledge, you know, ended up helping me out either way. You know, I don't do it for science anymore, but now I get to just make my own weird creatures and try to find that science or that anatomy that I fell in love with when I was a kid. You know, and try to incorporate that into my designs. These tips are really high. This is also the other thing too, is what's kind of nice about this is I haven't looked at this since last stream. And that's something else that I think is good to note is, you know, work on your stuff, but it's also important to give yourself a break as well from your work. So that way you can look back on it and go, oh, I need to make this longer, or I need to change this, or this doesn't look right. You know, you can come out with a fresh eye. If you're a 2D artist, it's kind of the same as, you know, being able to flip your canvas. But if we flip our canvas, it's mirrored. So, you know, walking away from it and not looking at it for a minute is really helpful. Ooh, favorite exotic animal that I would have if I could have it legally and it would be happy. That's a tough one. Well, my favorite animal is a great white shark, but I don't know if I'd want that as a pet. Because I love great whites, but like I think that'd be a little more difficult than I would want. I think like a giant Komodo dragon would be awesome, because it's basically like owning a Godzilla, you know? Just own a dragon. I mean, that's really what they are. That would be super cool. You have to like feed it cows. Yeah, Komodo dragon would be cool. I'm trying to think of other animals that are really... I mean, the little sugar gliders, some people do own them as pets, but I think those are pretty cool too. Something small to carry around, like as a little friend on your shoulder, I think would be nice. No one would want to come into my house if I owned a Komodo dragon. So I used to own like 6 lizards at one point. They were all Chinese water dragons. And they only get to be about, I mean, they're so big, but they get to be about 4 feet long. But most of that's tail, so they're not as big as they sound. When I tell people a 4-foot long lizard sounds really big, but they're not that big. They're a good sized lizard. They're not like backyard lizard, but it gets squirmy when picking them up. Yeah. If you're not used to reptiles, like they feel very different. I own a ball python. His name is Lerny, and he's adorable. He's a bananamorph, meaning that he's yellow. So he's yellow, white, and kind of purple. He's got a little bit of like a purplish tint to him, which is pretty cool. And he gets in more trouble than my dogs half the time. He's got quite the funny personality. He's in shed right now, so I have to leave him alone and not bother him. But yeah, he has a bioactive terrarium, so it's all live plants that he squishes and destroys, and I have to replace every so often, which is lovely. He loves it, and because he loves it, I'll keep doing it. So, trying to figure out this neck anatomy. Since he's got 2 shoulders, one's a lot closer to like a animal scapula, and then this one's a lot closer to just like your typical like bird delt type thing. So he's got 2 scapulas, and they're both kind of, and the way they would overlap onto the neck is kind of interesting to figure out how to make this shape feel cool. Quicksand, hello. What's up, Sand? How's it going? Cool creature. That's what we're working on. Doing some alien fauna. It was originally last week just alien, but I think our design slowly turned into kind of this like tiny, cool little bat creature. So I went ahead and changed it to just alien fauna as an archetype because it's my stream and I can do what I want. No, I just thought it would be fun to do this. But yeah, I'm just kind of, I'm kind of noodling at this point because I'm just talking. But I think I was just trying to get down some more of the anatomy that we're looking for. Now, one thing I will do before remeshing is I will repose this back out, kind of like so, and then I will inflate this a little more, so that way I can get the geometry and then I can bend it and squish it back onto itself. If you squish something too much onto itself, you won't have enough topology, you know, so you could even take this and kind of stretch it out a bit more so you get a more accurate interpretation of joints. That's why it's good to have, you know, all this armpit that's happening here is all really good, so that way if I squish or need to stretch him later, I should have enough topology to be able to move him around and whatnot. So if I go ahead and merge all that and dynamesh it. And again, I don't normally do this, but I'm doing it because this creature is more about detailing and doing like skin stuff. So that's why I'm merging it down, because it'll be easier to sculpt on one mesh just for this purpose. Also, I don't think his pose is going to be anything super crazy. But I'll duplicate this guy, I'll hide everything, and run a little ZBrush on it. And the only thing I like to check for is spiraling. So I'll usually kind of click around and make sure that my character in areas that ZBrush just has a tendency to spiral, I will click and make sure that there is no spiraling. And if you don't know what spiraling is, it's just basically, see how I can select basically like whole loops. So all these are completed loops that go around, right? That's what I want from a character. You don't want these crazy loops that go spiraling down something. This is fine because it just goes down into whatever. But sometimes you'll see that instead of these loops, it'll kind of like spiral all the way down, and that just it doesn't help the sculpt on. It's really gross topology. I think ZBrush has gotten a lot better at not spiraling, but you can see that all this is pretty good. I don't think I've run into anything yet, so. I always like to be more safe than sorry when checking this stuff. Because to like sculpt all this crazy detail and then realize that, you know, too late down the road, you know, your character's has the right topology, it's just kind of annoying. Yeah, okay. I think we're good. And again, this ZBrush is pretty good. I might, if I have it again, what do I get? I don't think I get anything super different. I actually got more topology somehow by picking half, so I guess we're good. But now if I wanted to, I could go ahead and turn back on that sculpt and reproject down. And then I'll subdivide, project, subdivide, project. So I can get back my detail from my Dynamesh onto my normal one. And now that I have that, I can just delete this guy. And this is, I think, where Okai Sato might say something like save. So I'm gonna save now. Because I remember I have my friends to help me. What's this guy? Oh, that's one of the old busts. We can delete that too. We did have this other like cool fur thing. I think we could still probably do that. I just don't want him to look like an old man. I think once it's like feathers, I think it would have a very different look, but it just makes him look like a billy goat at the moment. But I think if we pattern it like feathers, I think that could be a fun, interesting detail. And I think that's the biggest thing that'll make this character look really interesting is we're not going to do fur, we're going to do feathers. So I think it's kind of fun to mix like eye monkey with bat, but then give it like wings to glide rather than fur or like skin like a flying squirrel or something like that. Go ahead and grab my skin brush. I'm grabbing this Geo Napkill sculpting brush because it's awesome and it's free, so go grab it. I got the Geo. Synth is asking, so do you project on each subdivision level? I know some artists only project on one, while others project on each level. It depends on, I feel like it depends on how different your ZBrush becomes. I like to project on the first level to get it to match back because sometimes you'll run into the projection not matching exactly, and so you'll get like weird projection errors that way. So I like to try to just have the least amount of cleanup possible. So I'll usually just project on all subdivision levels, and I find that that gives me the cleanest projection, but it really just depends. You saw that from the face, like I didn't project anything at all, and that's just because I just didn't feel like I needed the detail from my Dynamesh. So it really does depend. In this case, I projected all just because it's a more complicated model. Oh, also, I like having these to the side because then I can switch them out. So if I know I'm not using like BH polish, I can switch it with the brushes that I am using, which is pretty nice. I'll also go ahead and grab the, I think I've talked about this brush before, but if you go to smooth, there's the smooth directional, which is a really great brush for creating forms and folds and stuff, and keeping, you know, the forms that you're trying to create, or smoothing them out, so you can kind of get like a nice blend between the two. A lot of it's just thinking about, you know, where are those insertion points, where's the scapula versus, you know, what's being overlaid on top of that. And kind of just finding all those muscles to kind of start bringing in or out. Again, I always tend, because it's such a fun part, I always tend to go a little probably too crazy. But, you know, I think it's good to go crazy, and then if you need to, you can always dial it back. It's a lot of weird, crazy anatomy going on there. Just trying to get what makes sense is, you know, the sternum's here, and then the pectoralis major muscle connects up into the humerus. So thinking about like where that insertion point is, and just getting enough volume to feel like there's going to be that overlap of the pectoralis muscle, and then the bicep's going to be underneath that. So and I'm looking at like a really skinny baboon arm to kind of help figure out where all this stuff can go. There's actually it's a pretty smooth transition from the scapula in the back, so that's kind of nice, because again, we're talking about like finding areas of rest, and then it actually has like kind of this webbing that goes into it, and that goes all the way down into the elbow. So when I'm working on stuff like this, I tend to bounce around from like spot to spot, just because, again, it's one of those things where like I can't flip canvas, and if I'm staring at something for a long time, you know, if I'm working on something for production, you know, for my job, then, you know, I can't take too long of breaks on it because I need to work, you know, a decent 8-hour day. So that's where like jumping around from different spots can help. You know, 1 second I'll be trying to clean up the arm, and then I'll go down and be like, okay, let's, you know, stop noodling. The moment I feel like I'm starting to noodle, that's when I'm like, all right, time to, you know, stop and move on, and pick like a different spot. And then I can move on to the next thing and try to find and clean up the anatomy there or whatever it is. This is where also I'm going in and fixing a bit more silhouette now that I have lower subdivision levels. It's a little easier to kind of get that elbow to be more like an elbow. And again, that geo brush plus the smooth directional is a really nice combination for organic sculpting. And I'm not at my highest resolution. You can see that I don't mind putting in detail at, you know, the lowest detail that you can to get a good, because if you don't like it, then you can just smooth it out, you know, and you're like, oh, I'll just start over. Whereas if you start detailing at a higher resolution, it's a little more difficult. So again, build slowly. It's kind of like, you know, when you are first starting out, you know, you do your sketch and foundation, and then you clean up your line work, and, you know, all that still very much applies to that 3D process. Yeah, the feel of it's really nice because it's kind of just like a pinchier Damien Standard. What I like is it fills in on the outside, so it feels more like an inflated pinch. Because the Damien Standard just kind of feels like you're just, I don't know, like if you look at the difference, it just cuts in, whereas the Geo one, like you see how it like kind of pinches and inflates, so you actually get like the feeling of real skin because skin is actually feeling like it's overlapping on itself, which is one of the harder things to sculpt. So the way you usually get something like that, for example, you know, is you would do the standard brush like this, and then you would go in, you know, and add some volume around it. So that way it felt more like a pinch. And then you could kind of just go back and forth, you know, and I still do that depending on what I'm doing. You know, it doesn't solve everything. But yeah, it has a lot smoother feel. It's really nice to make. I like making it big and adding like really intense insertion points. That's like kind of my favorite thing to do with it because I feel like it does that really well. But it's just kind of like the better Damien Standard, honestly. It just creates really nice forms while also carving. And I'll start making this feel a bit more like a sternum. So I'll thin out, you know, and carve in. And figure out where those kind of like bony landmarks would be. Jay is asking, was I ever hired as a concept artist? I did some concept work at Legacy Effects for a little bit, whenever they needed, you know, like a design, because we had so many commercials come in too that it'd be like, oh, concept this thing, or if we were working on a film or whatever. So yeah, I've definitely done some concept stuff before. Nothing super crazy, I would say, but we used to do concepting a lot. I do less of it now just because in games you do it was a little it's a little more specific as to like what my job title is, whereas at Legacy it was more of not like a free title, but it was just like, you know, whoever could do the job would just, you know, do the job. So if someone was busy and we didn't have a concierge working on it, they would just be like, Ashley, yeah, jump in and try to make some cool ideas. I broke my own rule. So one thing that I catch myself doing this all the time actually, is when you're sculpting like organically, our brains love patterns. So our brain, as you can see here, what I did is I sculpted 1, 2, 3, and see how they're like evenly spaced, right? That's kind of not what you want. You kind of want to make sure that when you're sculpting this stuff is you kind of have like a happy accident or feeling like it's, you know, natural and organic. So don't space things perfectly apart from one another. That'll very easily make it feel like it's not super organic or that you sculpted it, because humans love patterns. So we got to really break our own sense of pattern making when sculpting organically, because very quickly we'll just fall into patterns. I think I said before that I wanted this to inflate, right? I don't know if I'll have the topology to really do it, but I think I'm gonna hint that this part of him is almost like a turkey, like it's super wrinkly, so that way it'll look like it can inflate. So maybe there's like a lot of feeling of skin overlap or something. And these are more just like guidelines to, you know, where does stuff attach, where does stuff move and stretch, and like where are you going to get wrinkles, you know, like you'll get a lot of wrinkles if he's moving in his arms back and forth a lot, you know, you're going to get a lot of tension in the arm, or, you know, in the crook of the elbow is a really, you know, great example of where there's a lot of wrinkles happening because there's a lot of motion that happens around those joints. I have the forms a little bit, but I think I'm gonna smooth this out and clean this up a little bit because I want this to feel like a lat that's then going into another lat. So we'll have kind of a divot here. I think it just felt like there was too many forms happening that weren't really making any sense there. And then this is the ribs, so we'll make sure that that feels more rounded. And he's gonna have pretty big lats too, since he's gonna be like most of his day is spent hanging by these, you know, back grabber thingies, right? So we want the lats to be pretty prominent. And then he doesn't probably use his legs all that much, so that's going to be a little slightly weaker. But again, I'm kind of basing this off of that weird eye anatomy, or I'm looking at like a baboon and seeing like how their anatomy flows, to kind of give myself a good guide. Again, if you're just trying to like make a makeup anatomy, it's probably not the best use of your time. There's already so much cool anatomy out there that there's really no need to try to make up your own without reference. You can be different and experimental. You know, this guy has 3 limbs or 3 different sets of limbs and all that sort of stuff, right? But I'm still basing that structure around something that already exists, and that just makes my job a lot easier, but it's also going to make him feel a lot more realistic, because these are all shapes that, whether you know it or not, subconsciously, we all know these shapes. So that's an important part too, is that relatability and believability in your designs. Because I'm sure we've all seen maybe I don't know, maybe a creature that we're just like, nah, that couldn't, there's no way that thing could do that, you know. And you'd be probably right. I mean, there's tons of things that this creature would probably do movement wise that you'd be like, you know, but we wanted to make it look like it can do those things. So that's where we're basing it off of real anatomy. Will always help. I'm sure this is probably everybody's favorite part, but this is definitely, you know, one of my favorite parts of the process, because you just get to hang out and kind of just focus on one thing at a time. And if you have a long enough time, you know, I mean, in the stream, we'll see how far I can get, but, you know, normally with something like this, you could spend a while working on it to get it up to snuff, you know, even a week. If I spent like a week on this, you know, which again, you guys, it goes out in the span of a month, but really we only spend like 8 hours on it. So this is kind of treat these sculpts almost like a work day. It's like an 8-hour work day, if you really think about it. Some of the sculpts I take and I'll work on them a little bit more outside the stream, but you know, for all the episodes that are about, you know, 4 episodes, it's about 8 hours of work. So think about taking that and then, you know, timesing that by 4. You know, you'll get something pretty cool and detailed by the end of it. Also, every now and then adding a bit of the build-up to kind of break up these lines is also usually pretty helpful. You don't want to make a perfectly straight, consistent, you know, line for everything, because then it doesn't feel like it's skin that's overlaying on muscle. For creatures like these, since they're all skinned, you separate the head from the body to create texture sets, or just keep them all in one set. Normally, you almost always allocate more texture set in space to the head, just because usually that's the thing that you're going to be zooming up on and doing all that stuff. So it usually is pretty important to give it more space than the rest of the model. But that being said, it kind of depends, you know, if you're doing some like really crazy rendering for it, and you have a bunch like UDIMs and whatnot for this character, then maybe you could sparse out. Usually it's heads and hands, right? Because hands you're also going to see usually up close with, especially with a creature that's going to be performing, on screen, or you're rendering out to do something. That's where all that can kind of come in handy. So I'm just selecting parts to see if I can get loops, and then I can auto group it. And then I can select these and group that, select this. Oops. Oh, I didn't do the other side, did I? Or did I? Oh, no, I didn't. There we go. Just selecting stuff out. Oh, that didn't loop. That is kind of a spiral, but that's not an end of the world spiral, I guess. Of course I missed that one spiral. Of course I did. ZBrush, you're so annoying. Again, don't use ZBrush for proper topology. It's fine for stuff like this, but ideally you want to make your own. When I do creatures for production, what's the average poly count in ZBrush that you end up with when detailing? It kind of depends on the creature. For like human faces alone could be like, 50 million polygons or so. You can go pretty crazy. This guy's only at 5. I try not to go above, because the moment, so it quadruples obviously. So if I do this one more time, I'm gonna get like 25 million for this creature. That should be fine. I don't see going over that. For the face, you can obviously be a little more particular and detailed, or but that's why we it's not, you got to think of it as like you're not adding more topology to the face, but because it's a separate object, all 20 million polygons are going just to the face. So that's where the splitting it up makes a big difference, right? So I think that's the biggest thing. But yeah, I very rarely, unless, humans are hard because like we add all these crazy pore details and stuff like that. But a lot of it's also done in texture work now, I think you actually get the better result doing it all in texturing rather than, sculpting. It's also just way more editable. Texturing with like pore details and, things like that. It just comes a lot easier. So for sculpting purposes, I actually don't go that high anymore for that detail, and I just let a lot of my work happen in texture. If that makes sense. Oh, that makes sense, he says. Okay. I said if that makes sense, and then I looked up and says that makes sense. I was like, oh, all right, good. So yeah. You know, when I'm sculpting this, I would say that smooth directional brush is doing a lot of that work, keeping these cool forms in place. So now we'll try to find where that oblique muscle would go. I do a lot of that stuff too, where I'm carving away, just like almost like using a rake brush in real life to get like a smoother transition into something. All those same things definitely apply. Yeah, so Synth is talking about, you know, detailing heads and for like shirtless characters or something like that. For something like Street Fighter, they might be cutting the neck like way up into the base of the neck, right? So that way it's still separate, but they'll rig it together and it'll move like as if it's together. Usually we cut a head down here at the chest. That's usually really common because when you wear a shirt or whatever, you want the neckline, or if someone's wearing like a V-neck, you know, you want to be able to keep that geometry the same. And the biggest reason we do that too is because if the character's wearing, you know, I'm wearing like a long sleeve and I'm wearing pants, so the only skin part of me you see is my face, hands, and like feet. So we also do that because then we can just cull out the body, so we don't have to render it. So you just get rid of it, basically, you just hide it. But yeah, but for like shirtless characters, it's a little more tricky, but we still probably cut. You don't have to cut the geometry in half to get better resolution. You can just cut the UV seam and then make the head bigger than, you know, the rest of the body. The biggest thing is hiding the seams, so that way you can't see the seam line of where like texture resolution gets better all of a sudden. You know, that would be really weird to see in a game where like you see pores and it just like dithers out. So you just try to hide that stuff and be sneaky. That's what a character artist's job is, really. It's just being sneaky. Do I ever get a normal map issue? Sorry, excuse me. With shirtless characters. No, not usually, just because the baking, when you bake, because you're baking a full character onto, you know, that stuff. And yeah, when the texture is slightly different, you can see a seam. But you'd have to be really looking for it, because again, we try to hide the seams. And then again, for a shirtless character, we would hide it up. At least I would hide it up in the base of the neck. Either that, or you can cut it somewhere clever. But yeah, if it's a shirtless character and you're constantly seeing like cowboy shots or close-ups or like something like that, then you don't want to put that seam where it's like super visible. But you also might do something with a shirtless character that you wouldn't do with normal characters, which is just keep the texture resolution the same. So whatever the resolution of the face is, you just leave the body at that as well, and then you don't have that issue. You know, and if you only have, you know, street fighting games, you only render 2 characters at a time. They can totally afford, you know, to have that detail, and that's fine. If you're rendering like hundreds of shirtless dudes with really crazy textile densities, then, you know, maybe that's more problematic for games, but, you know, that's not really the issue that you run into most of the time. Yeah, change the seam position to like somewhere under the jaw or something like that, you know. Yeah, you just gotta be sneaky about where you're putting that seam line now, you know, with stuff like that. But it's always, you know, that's what's fun about games or something, is because there's always kind of something like that to solve. Kind of moved it, so I think the anatomy would change a little bit here. Time for a quick save. You're right. You're right. Why are you so the best? Uh-oh. Did my mouse stuck? What happened to the mouse? There we go. Save break. It does look like a face. It looks like an owl. Nice. We actually have a whole Slack channel that's dedicated to unknown faces in our game. It's pretty funny because you can find faces in everything. I forget. There's actually a name for it. There's like a scientific name for like finding faces in things. I don't remember what it's called, but I think it's pretty cool that it's got a name. So I was going to work on the face first, and I ended up just getting so lost in... This is what happens. I'm just like, yeah, I'll work on this first, and then I don't. Because I really do. I bounce around so much when I'm working. It's just I'll work on something, I see it, I'll fix it, and then I'll kind of look at it, and then I'll see something else, and I go to that and fix it, you know. I think that keeps it fun. Maybe it makes it take a little longer than it should, because I you know, most people might just be like, sculpt the arm, you know, and then move on. But I don't tend to do that. I tell myself I will, but then I'm going here and then I look down and I'm like, oh, the knee needs work, you know, and so then I'm like, I haven't touched the knee yet, and then I'll go down and be like, oh, I'll just do this now. To each their own, I guess, but. That hamstring in there. And then there's a split, so the hamstring goes on one side and it goes to the other side. And then in here is where the calf muscle comes out of. So then you get an insertion point for where the calf comes out. Periodolia. Yeah, I couldn't remember the name of it, but yeah, I was gonna say I thought it started with a P as well, and I guess it does. So awesome. Yeah, super interesting. You know, it's the same technique. I don't know if anybody does this, but when you're like in a bathroom and you see like weird cloudy tiles and you can like find creatures or like faces, you know, within the tile. Super fun, by the way, to like snap a picture of it and draw it later. You know, it's good inspiration when you're on the go. When you're on the go or gotta go, you can still have inspiration. Ha ha ha. Alright, I'll zoom in and work on the face a little bit. It's nice to get probably the face a little more solidified. Oops. Do I have something masked? Oh, I did. That's why. I was like, it's a subdivision. Here we go. Oh, do that on plane rides, yeah, and you see all sorts of shapes in the clouds. Yeah, definitely. So, I have skin brushes that, could do a bunch at once, but I usually like to lay down the initial ones, or at least the initial direction first, before you get any. If you just start going willy-nilly with brushes, then you create no order. I feel like when you have to go in and detail it by hand first, you then create a sense of area of, rest versus busy, because honestly, I think, you just get too bored of trying to put detail everywhere, right? So it's kind of a good way to like restrain and limit yourself to making good detail choices rather than just being like, oh my god, this brush is so cool, and then just putting it everywhere. Which we all do, it's kind of like when everyone wants to just put too much chromatic aberration on their pieces, and you're like, yeah, calm down, too much, dial it back a bit. Yeah, it gets busy very, very fast if you don't pay attention to the fact that, you can just go basically ham with it from the get-go, and it just gets real, real crazy. So, but if I can go in here instead and, start detailing out my own, your choices are just going to be better. And obviously, I try not to go too crazy, because then also you want to eventually turn off symmetry as well. So, but I don't mind getting fairly far and then just going over to one side and just kind of messing one up a little bit. That's not usually the end of the world for me. But there is no secret to any of this. It's just looking at your reference and knowing, good anatomy flow, finding areas that are really busy, such as the nose, and then I'll give, the muzzle maybe more of an area of rest. I'll put maybe some little dots and stuff on it, for like whiskerish type feeling. But I'll, for the most part, leave the rest of that, like alone. I won't go in here and be like, yeah, time to detail, right? Because then it just gets usually too much. So you're gonna have like really crunchy detail right here, where things are like really overlapping, and you're getting like really cool skin folds. Then have this part. It's not that there shouldn't be detail, but have it be something more like this, right? Where it's super soft, super subtle, and then we still get nice, skin breakup without it being too overwhelming, for the whole piece. And a lot of this too is I'll try to like constantly pick up my pen, so that way, because you don't want to just get these like perfectly clean lines. Like, that's not what I'm doing. I'm actually kind of like constantly picking up and like kind of starting the line over, and then I'll go back over and kind of hatch over it. And that's how you can get some like, and then I'll go in and smooth it, right? See what remains and kind of find like those other happy accidents that went through it, right? And that's how you can kind of start finding some like more interesting detail. Besides just going in and being like, right? Like that doesn't really help. Yeah, it's way more natural because if you look at skin folds, like the reason skin's folds happen is because the skin is folding over and over again. But our skin, we get wrinkles because our skin doesn't fold the same way every single time. So that's why you get, where there are skin folds, you get variations within, you know, the wrinkles because our eye blinks aren't exactly the same every time, or the way our arm bends isn't exactly the same every time. So it's important to put in, you know, that wrinkle variance, and that's why it looks more natural. It's because that's what would actually be, you know, kind of happening. And then you can kind of go crazy with it, but then I like to use the clay buildup to kind of build some of it back and kind of smooth it out a little bit and see if, you know, there's certain things that are working or not working. You know, sometimes it might be a little too much. Like I'm not sure if I put the seam line here on the right spot. I feel like it breaks it up kind of equidistantly. So I can smooth it out and just kind of maybe run this a little closer. And then I'll let it fold under. So that way we get that skin lap. So this piece of skin feels like it's overlapping the eyeball more. If that makes sense. And that feels a little more natural. So yeah, it's stuff like that you can start. And this is also the reason why I say that like realism doesn't, like in film, doesn't really exist. Because to make something look stylized, all I'd have to do is kind of sculpt it the way I've been sculpting, right? Like you've seen me sculpt before so many times on this stream. But now we're just adding skin detail and kind of being more careful about our forms, and then it'll look something that's quote unquote realistic. These are still like super stylized proportions, right? It's all a matter of how you handle it that's going to make it feel like it belongs in Avatar, or Avatar like Blue People, you know, live action, or if it's going to feel like it's a Diablo, you know, character that you're fighting off in the thousands or something. It's all just a matter of context and how you texture it. That's going to sell like where it lives and how it lives in, you know, whatever world you're putting it in. And that's honestly probably a pretty good test to do for all of you guys who want to, you know, get better at like stylization, or is take one sculpt, make it feel like it's supposed to be an Overwatch, then take that same sculpt and make it feel like it's, you know, Last of Us, you know, where it's like more realistic, you know, take it and then do super giant game type style with it. So that's always a really nice way to realize that it's not so much the shapes that you choose that's making something stylized, it's kind of like how you finish it. Obviously stylized shapes can be more exaggerated, but this is a pretty exaggerated shape, you know, we're kind of doing something that feels a little more realistic. Synth is asking, when I'm doing UVs and baking for production, do I usually close the eyelids? I remember playing some games and those characters, whenever they blink, you see dark spots. Yeah, those are people that didn't bake stuff properly. Yeah, normally for a character like this this actually doesn't have enough topology. But normally you would take this and you would make an eyelid, you know, that kind of does something like that. It doesn't have to be fully open or fully closed, I mean, you know, and then you texture that, and then you blend shape that folding up and blinking. So that way, yeah, you do get all this detail. I actually did kind of, but the topology for the lowest res doesn't have that topology, but you would definitely want that for your future bakings. Because yeah, if you're getting black dots when they blink, it just means that there's an AO bake that didn't bake properly, probably. That's probably what that dark spot is. Trying to look at the ears here. It's actually smooth. It's actually pretty smooth here, and then it gets rigid on the outside. It does these little bumpy things. And then because it's fun, I will, with the rest of this, I'll poly paint. Just because I like to, you know, I'll get to a spot like this and then I'll try to figure out, you know, what colors do I think would be cool. So I'll run and I'll try to get like a base color. And also, you know, you might run into some happy accidents too with something like this, because you can change the hue saturation later. I'm gonna just colorize everything so it's not blindingly white, because it always is. I can't see it when it's like full white. It's just, it hurts my eyes. But you know, he is an alien, so maybe we can go for like a bluish color. And so I'll start with like kind of a base like this, and then I'll run with my paintbrush. I'll do the little speckled one and do the spray so it sprays like that. I don't personally like this color spray to start with because I'm picking very specific colors. So you can either turn it off or turn it really low. And then I'll start putting in actually veins first. So I'll usually grab this little squiggly one, and this is kind of how I do texturing for, you know, skin. You also need enough topology for it, by the way, too. So this is only at 2 million, so the pixels might not be great. So I could subdivide it one more time. And I'm gonna put some blood vessel, wherever there'd be more blood vessels, I'll put more red. I'll still cover the surface. But anywhere that there's gonna be a lot of, you know, blood vessels running through, so the ears will be like much richer in red. And then I'll go ahead and run like a green. Look at the saturation in this. And I'm just kind of like zigzagging and crisscrossing. And then I'll get like a very bright blue to overlay on top of that. So you get kind of like this cool mixture of colors to begin with. It looks really crazy and weird and colorful to start with, but it's a good base to start with because it gives kind of the colors that would be underneath the skin. Right, so it'll make it feel a little more translucent. And then now I can go in with like a white. And you'll see what the white does. as I start kind of like overlaying all this stuff, it'll kind of start to marry all of this together. Again, at a very, I kind of build up to this. As like a base. And now that I have that, then I'll go in with like actual color and pick, you know, okay, I want. And I'll go in with, instead of the veiny brush, I'll do the spraying one. And then I'll start to spray on top of that. And it's really subtle, but you'll get like this little variance of stuff. That I feel like makes a pretty big difference. It just adds more color variation than just like filling it blue. And I like the speckle brush because it doesn't fill everything at once. Oh, I forgot to turn on back. So it'll be a lot more subtle when you're like applying colors like this. And then I'll just kind of start color picking and, you know, going from there. And any sort of like blood vessels or whatever that you lose, you can always bring it back. But, you know, now we got this pinkish kind of reddish color. And then maybe for his under, we can go with that something known as counter camouflage, which is a dark upside and a light underbelly. And the idea is that creatures looking above are looking up into the sun. So you have a light underbelly, so you can blend in with basically the light of the sun. And then same thing when you're looking down, you're seeing all the shadows cast, and you're seeing, you know, especially underwater or something like that. But in, you know, canopies, it's the same. It's darker as you look down. So then, you know, when you look down on the animal, it's dark and blends in. And then when you look up at the animal, it's white and blends in. So it's called counter camouflage. It happens in nature all the time. James says like sharks. Exactly like sharks. Sharks are the best example of it, for sure, because the most you see it as an example in is usually the water, just because, you know, in the ocean there's no trees to hide you or anything like that. So the best way to stay hidden is when you look down, you blend in with the sea floor below, and then when you look up, you blend in with the light above. Stitch, is that you? Oh my god, it is. We're just doing realistic Stitch now, guys. That's it. Now we can add color to his eyes too. We did have those really bright, I don't know. Could do blue. I mean, orange would probably be pretty cool. There's like these really bright orange eyes that look pretty cool. Oh no! I don't think it's enough topology. Oh no, I'm still in spray. That's why I was like, why is that being so weird? I want him to look like he's You know, I don't want him to do that number. That's not a good thing. Maybe you have like really thin. That could be interesting. Yeah, that could be fun. He's scary Fauna now. I mean, we could turn him into Stitch and, you know, make him super cute. All you gotta do is add giant eyes. Now he's Stitch. But yeah, now once you have something like Cincinnati all of a sudden came to life. Color changes it a ton. Yeah, it does. Color adds a lot of stuff to it for sure. So I'll hide that mask and then I'll color pick and then I can make something a little slightly darker. Go back to my spray. You know, maybe he's got like kind of striped things. That's one way I would like start adding some interesting, like, you know, patterns. You can get really kind of interesting stuff with just lassoing. You like the cat eyes? Okay, cool. Yeah, the cat eyes are cool. It's pretty scary. He looks like he just has flames on his face now. But we'll come up with something more fun than that later. Oops, it's going back so many times. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Probably save, right? Save time. But yeah, color, you can see like the moment you put color on something, you're like, oh man, I gotta put color on everything. Because it adds a lot of cool stuff to it. So I like to grab like an in-between. You know, go ahead and color pick. Oops. You could do that technique I told you in reverse where you know, block out the main color shapes first. And then we can add the veiny stuff after. I do think it's important just to add some sort of form of coloration. That's more of the point than anything else. Right, so we have something like that, and then we can color pick that white. Now, I do like coloring early. I think one thing to keep in mind when you do this, though, is do check your grayscale. It is important to still look at your design in color or your design without color. Just so that way it's kind of like a baseline. It'll change the way it looks, you know. It does bring it to life really fast because we are used to seeing things in color. So it's just one of those, it's not a cheat because, you know, eventually things end up in color anyway, but it is important to just check your design and be like, okay, I'm still, you know, it still looks good with or without color. You know, if you feel like your color's adding pretty much everything about your design, that's probably probably an issue, right? But adding some basic color is a nice thing to do. Adds a lot of cool breakup. I think it helps too to also get in the sense of like what's top, what's bottom, and like just get a nice feeling of like the creature overall. Just kind of wondering if his eyes should be like even darker to like contrast that. Polynud. I'm just gonna call you Poly. Very cool sculpt. Love it. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for watching the stream. There'd be no point if you guys weren't tuned in, so I appreciate it. And yeah, you can see that sometimes it's going to be a little harder to see certain things, you know, if you're sculpting on something or whatever it, you know, may be. So just remember to like kind of constantly check your scale. This has been bugging me literally the whole session. You don't get that sternocleidomastoid right, man. The rest of the sculpts. Might as well not even sculpt it. He looks like he's like, he's showing off his muscles. Yeah, and then we can think about, like, you know, if he's a really dark colored creature, you know, what are his wings going to look like? Maybe he's kind of like ravenish almost. And we can kind of play with those colors. There's also this like blue heron thing that I have in my reference that we could maybe reference. Or maybe his plumage is like super bright and colorful, right? Like that's pretty common. So we could do like bright blues and purples. Because males tend to be also super colorful. So, you know, we can play a lot with like how colorful this creature gets. A lot of rainforest characters or creatures or animals are usually pretty colorful. So and then I think the plumage will kind of go along here. So oh, and also if you like this speckled, you know, it's really tightly speckled. If you go into your smooth, it'll smooth it away, right? So just make sure that when you go to smooth, you can actually turn off RGB. And then when you smooth it, you can see that the speckle polypaint stays the same, but your sculpt can smooth without losing your polypaint detail. So if you know you have a bunch of veins and stuff and you start smoothing, you won't lose that detail. Which I don't know how they do. It's actually pretty magical. So. Also, to look at your model, I like Skin Shader as a model, and then I also like Fast Shader. I feel like Fast Shader is kind of close to almost like a Maya, but it's a little easier on the eyes than the Startup. You can see the Startup gets like these really thick, like contrasty dark lines, which kind of helps me see. It doesn't help me see the sculpt as well. So I personally like to go into. I like Fast Shader just because it feels a little. It feels like Maya almost. So if you're used to like Lambertian kind of like shading, then that helps. And I just feel like I see my forms really clearly in a shader like this, especially when you get to like really textural details. You can kind of see everything, which is important. Synths, I know what you're doing there, sir. Very funny. You don't like the red wax? I know. Shocker. I thought all ZBrush artists like the red wax. It's actually the first thing that I teach my students. I tell them if you stay in red wax, I will not look at your final. Like I won't look at your homework if you make me look at red wax because it's a horrible shader. That, I'll say that, and then also keeping the gradient in the background, that black to white gradient in your ZBrush background, that's also a big no-no. Don't show me that either. Don't take a screenshot and show me that hideous black and white gradient. I sculpt with gold. I don't know what you guys are talking about. Because now it's money. Now the sculpt is money. And we're done. That's all we have to do. Just sculpt it in gold. And I hope you can see it. Today was a pretty chill stream. I don't know how, if we're looking at like progress made, it's nothing. I mean, it's decent progress, but I think it's good to. I hope this is a nice stream for you guys to see kind of like how this detailing kind of comes to life, because it's not this magical. Well, Geo's brush kind of is a magical brush, to be honest. But that's besides the point. It's not just about that brush. It does take, a lot of time just to kind of sit and noodle on things in a good way, to figure out your shapes and your lines. And a lot of this like detailing that you see a lot of professionals do or whatever, it's not a magical brush. It's just going in and, kind of picking and choosing by hand and following that reference that we have to help guide us to make interesting and like smart decisions about, the anatomy of our creatures that we're, coming up with. I want to add a bit more cheekbone. Right, so it feels a little more like a cheekbone. Just right there. I'm sorry I can't pronounce your name, but hi on YouTube. The new Oscar VFX award, yeah. You get ZBrush Gold. Weird bat statue by girls that they don't know. Be like, this is a sculpt by Ashley Stegon. They're like, I don't know who that is. But awesome. I mean, I think it'd be cooler than getting like a man just standing there. It's not super exciting, is it? They should revamp that Oscar. Or is the man Oscar? Is that his name? I don't even know where it originates from. I feel like as a film person I should probably know this, but I don't. And again, you can see I went back to the grayscale, just because it's easier to see detail. Because when I do that, right, like to sculpt that detail right now, because the ear's not really painted that well, it's kind of, it's not great. So that's where it's good to paint to get an idea of your character kind of coming to life, you know. Also, the fast shader colored is not great. I like the skin shade colored. So going back and forth from a lot of shaders. But you can see I don't see how crisp that detail is because a lot of it gets lost in the color. So just keep that in mind too. I like to go a lot. I go a lot back and forth. I like to have stuff colored, but I'll also turn it off and, you know, work with it. And then I'll re-poly paint when I feel like I get to a certain spot and see how that feels, you know, and then I can keep going. So it's a lot of like slow back and forth, you know, with this stuff. Farmer's wondering if we could make there's like that laugh actually kind of scared me, I'm not gonna lie. I was like, who is that? I wonder if we can make a pattern kind of like, I don't know, something interesting on his face that then we can color to be like really brightly colored. So that's where he shows off his, you know, crest to like all the ladies in the alien forest or whatever it is, you know. However he gets attention. So it's going to be his plumage and maybe like, because I'm thinking of like a mandrill. You know, a mandrill has like those super cool bright colors. And I'm wondering if we can kind of do something similar where like his maybe really flowery looking nose kind of branches out into these cool color patterns from the front or something. I don't know. It's just a thought. I'm not probably going to do it now because we're almost out of time, but it could be fun. Oh, so it is a guy that resembled Uncle Oscar, which is why they're called the Oscars. Interesting. I mean, it says the real story is kind of unclear, but I like that story. That's an interesting one. I do think it's funny that it's just called the Oscars because someone was like, "That looks like Uncle Oscar," and that's it. I didn't know Uncle Oscar was made of gold. It's very interesting. Still working on the shoulder. This part was definitely, still is kind of the trickier part to make sure that all this feels like it's overlapping right. There's a lot of muscles kind of either going under or going over. But anyway, well, I hope this was helpful. I hope this was fun for you guys to watch. There are no secrets to, you know, starting to sculpt out that anatomy. And we'll just keep going. We're going to keep making, you know, we'll finish up, you know, some skin. We'll add some more skin stuff, you know, fix on the hands and do all that stuff. Next time, and probably start adding his feathers, which will be super fun. I also chose to do feathers because I don't think I've done feathers for the stream, and they're actually pretty fun and not too hard to do. So we're just going to use some fun ZBrush tools to make making feathers a lot easier, and yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. So I might work on this guy a little more just so I can do like some skin texturing, like finalized skin texturing next week, and then work on some plumage. And then we could probably pose and render like we usually do the following session. So that's kind of the plan for this guy. So thanks for tuning in, you guys. Pleasure as always. Again, this is Archetype. If you guys are new here, glad you guys found the stream. This is by Gnomon. I'm the host, Ashley, and this is Archetype, sponsored by Dell. So we are here every Wednesday, 7 to 9. So go ahead and join in. I don't know if I can say subscribe or follow. I don't know how it works on Twitch. I guess YouTube, you subscribe to the Gnomon channel. But yeah, follow along, and I make a character almost every week. So it was awesome having you guys. If you guys were lurking, I appreciate the lurkers. I appreciate the chat, as always, keeping me company. And I'll see you guys next week, all right? Bye!